Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Home Tech podcast. I'm Seth Johnson, and joined as usual by Jason Griffin. Jason, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Seth. How are you?
Pretty good. Busy week. I see you have been at the Savant Dealer Summit there in Denver.
I was. Yeah. I was here in my hometown of Denver and had a lot of fun. It was, it was a quick summit, just basically a day and a half with, an evening reception prior to that, and really interesting. We're going to dive into that and talk about it a little bit. Had a great time, caught up with some old friends, and really learned a lot. Savant is a company that very much appears to be very committed to getting refocused on the custom installer, which has been a big topic of conversation amongst the dealer base for quite some time, and so I look forward to sharing with you some of my thoughts on that, at least the ones I can. They did ask us to kind of keep some of that stuff a little bit confidential, so we won't dive into all the nitty-gritty, but there are definitely some interesting stories that came out of that summit that I look forward to sharing with you.
Very cool. Yeah, I can't wait to. I mean, a couple of things have leaked out, but I can't wait to talk about it. Sounds like a lot of cool stuff you saw.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So we're just going to just going to be you and me this week. We don't have a guest lined up, and so we look forward to kicking around a few news stories. Before we do that, we wanted to do a couple of quick housekeeping things. First of all, wanted to send a huge thank you to Richard Guinness, who came on at the $5 level as a new patron to the show. Richard, we really, really appreciate you supporting the podcast here. It means a lot to us. And if you're listening and you're not familiar with what that means to become a patron, that's a way that you can financially support our efforts here at the Home Tech Podcast. You can do that for as little as $1 a month, and you can learn more by going to HomeTech.fm/support. Once again, that's HomeTech.fm/support. So thank you, Richard, so much for taking the time and for the generous contribution.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. I want to echo Jason's comments there, and I also want to thank all the rest of our patrons. Jason, the numbers are adding up, and it looks like that one put us over our 150 mark. So
yeah,
live show.
We're right there. Yeah. Yeah, if you're listening and you're not familiar, we have a funding goal as part of that patron page, and we've been waiting to get to that goal to where we'll start producing this podcast as a live show that you can tune in and listen to us as we're recording, which I think will be a lot of fun. It'll be I think it'll add an interesting dynamic and twist to the show, and might take us a little bit of time to get that spun up. But we do need to hedge a little bit here and say that Patreon does work on a kind of retroactive monthly basis. And so we've got to wait and see where we come down here. It might take a week or so for us to figure out, because if we did have anybody drop off during the month, then we may not actually be at that goal. But I'm pretty confident that we will be, and look forward to diving into doing that live episode with you.
Yeah, that would make me sad. Don't make me sad.
No, I think we're going to get there.
Yeah,
but
I think we're there. We've got to be there.
It's kind of weird how it works. You kind of just have to wait and see. So we'll certainly be keeping our audience posted.
Speaking of keeping the audience posted, looks like friend of the show Richard Berry was featured in CE Pro, and just a little tease, he's going to be an upcoming guest on our own show.
Yeah, I saw the article, and I have to say we had no idea that he was going to be featured in CE Pro this week. I think it's very cool. He does have an interesting business model and an interesting approach to the smart home. I actually met Richard. We met him at Cedia, but actually saw Richard here at the dealer summit just a couple of days ago. So it was good to catch up with him. This is an interesting article. We'll include a link to HomeTech.fm/145 is where you'll be able to find that. And you can learn a little bit about how Richard is approaching the smart home. And if you're interested in learning more after you read that article, be sure to tune in next week for episode 146. And we're going to be joined by Richard to dive into what he's doing and explore what's working and what's not. And I think it should be a really fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, we met up with Richard at Cedia and had a nice little sit down breakfast with him and one of his colleagues there. And man, what a cool business. So there have been a number of people who have reached out through Twitter over time and asked a very specific question about how dealers build a company based on DIY products. And Richard is definitely one of the people that has figured that out. So looking very much looking forward to speaking with him about how that process works and how his business is, set up, because it's probably not product based like most custom integrator companies. It's probably more service based, which is great.
Yeah, I think he's got a mix, and the company, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, is called Hummingbird Cd Pro. The deck right there in the article mentions average installation price of $35,000. So clearly he's moving some product, but like you said, an interesting model that really leverages a lot of these standalone, or what most people would consider standalone point solutions. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to chat with him. But let's move on and dive in here to some of the stories that we want to touch on this week. And the number one topic that we're going to lead out with here, really a dealer-focused story, is that Savant Dealer Summit that we had here in Denver, Colorado this week. And I think that, like I alluded to at the beginning of the episode here, the number one takeaway that unmistakably I think everybody came away with was that the company is very much recommitted to its focus on the high-end luxury custom installation market. And I think that was welcome news amongst the dealer base. Bob Madonna is one of the founders of the company. He has recently returned as the CEO and replaced William Lynch, who was really focused more, I think, on trying to get the company, I don't know, I guess diversified and how to get positioned in that more DIY type of market. And it just didn't really pan out the way that Savant wanted it to, I don't think. And just to hear Bob Madonna kind of speak about that and some of the reasons that he decided to come back, I won't go into in all the detail, but at the end of the day, I do feel comfortable saying and letting everybody know is that the company, in my opinion, is unquestionably dedicated to getting back into the luxury market, and I look forward to watching what comes of that.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that was it was interesting. I mean, I thought their move to diversify into more of a DIY product solution was very interesting. I mean, it caused a lot of excitement and got a lot of press. I think Savant got their name out there quite a bit. It's almost too bad it didn't work out, because if it did, I think they would have had a run and grab hit. Like there wouldn't have been anything that could have stopped them. So I'm kind of disappointed to see that they're going to be scaling back from the DIY product. Like what is it called? The Savant remote they've been selling in Best Buy.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a really cool remote, and it would be. Are they going to continue selling that?
So the remote itself, without question, they're going to that'll continue to be available, but there will be some changes in how it's positioned and set up with distribution and access and all of that. So without getting super specific, I do feel safe saying that that remote is definitely not going anywhere. It's a beautiful remote, very well designed, but they're just they're gonna, I guess, clean some things up and consolidate the distribution and just make it a little more true, hew a little more true to a Savant's original heritage.
Very cool. Like you said, focused on the luxury market, and some of the things here in the CE Pro article that I got to read about, you got to see and maybe get some hands-on time with. 4K video over IP solution. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, that was one of the big stories. They're definitely very excited about it, and that is one that Julie over at CE Pro has caught wind of a couple of the specific stories, and that's one that's starting to leak out, and word is going to get out pretty quick on that one. It's basically a direct competitor to like a just add power type of system, a very scalable way to do HDMI video distribution. Certainly not cheap, but the benefit, as you know, Seth, of using that sort of architecture is how well it scales. So there does come a certain point at which, on very large luxury residential products, using that network backbone to route your 4K video around the house actually becomes more cost effective than a traditional matrix with point-to-point HDMI or HD-based T extenders. So that gets a little bit in the weeds and a little bit technical, but I think it's important to understand those are fundamentally different technologies, and for anybody who's evaluating video distribution, whether from a buying perspective or an installation perspective, it's important to understand the design and cost trade-offs of one versus the other.
Right. I would say from an installer's point of view, and a guy who had to sell these systems for a number of years, the video over IP solutions tend to be much more reliable and easier to troubleshoot than the standalone matrix ones, which have or HDBaseT ones, which could have balance that are affected by static or weird HTCP handshake issues.
Yep.
Man, I've put in many Just Add Power systems, and those things are relatively rock solid. I mean, it is made for a commercial environment, and it certainly shows. I think most of these systems that are out, the video over IP, HD over IP systems, are kind of come from that commercial market space. So they're already kind of premium products anyway, because you're not really selling that many. It's not like a mass market product.
Yep.
But they have to have their performance too. They have to stand up to commercial environments and sports bars and stadiums and that kind of thing. So typically you get a better product than you would for the home if you went out and bought an HDMI matrix switch. So very exciting to see that come to Savant as well.
Yeah, it's cool technology, and yeah, we can move on from there. But just wanted to close by saying they've really got some interesting things going on as far as looking at the spec sheets and stuff that if you really want to geek out on this stuff, certainly keep an eye out for it as the information starts to become a little more public. If there's anybody in the audience who's very interested in the cutting edge, sort of bleeding edge of video distribution, this is certainly a product you should take a hard look at.
Yep. And the next thing that they have on here is a touchscreen. I didn't realize Savant didn't have a touchscreen. Maybe you can fill me in on what that's about.
Yeah, they did, like when they first came out years and years ago, they had I think the Rosie line of touchscreens is what they called it, and they were big and clunky. I remember those. But everybody they had to have a touchscreen at that time because everybody did. This was pre iPad era. They were one of the companies that really, when the iPad first came out, they were I think probably the first major control company to just immediately say we're getting out of the touch panel business and we're just going to be all iPad and iPhone, and they really went all in with that. But they are getting back into the touchscreen business as this press release. Again, Julie Jacobson at CE Pros is what we're citing here, but she actually looks like had a look at some sort of press release that I haven't seen yet, but it alludes to a touchscreen. A couple of different offerings there, more details to come on that. I don't know. I go back and forth on this one. We've talked about the touchscreen business before and how, as a manufacturer, it's not one that I personally would want to be involved in. I think that touchscreens have just become such a commodity. But then on the flip side of that coin, because they have become such a commodity, they've presumably gotten a lot less expensive and less, I guess, complicated to manufacture. And so if a company like Savant feels like they can put an interesting twist on it or add value to really round out their product line and give their dealers and their bottom line a nice little add-on revenue opportunity, then I think it can make sense. And so I look forward to being able to share a little bit more detail about this and watch how it does in the market.
I remember getting the very first iPad in my hand at our office. I remember this very distinct, and launching apps on it and flipping through, playing with it and saying, geez, I'm never selling another touchscreen again. Like, there was no reason to. I mean, what we had at the time, even on the Control 4 side, which at the time Control 4 was going for that cheap down market, mid market solution. It was a $2,500 10-inch touchscreen.
Right.
It was about 2 inches thick. It weighed a ton. The battery would drain within moments of you taking it off the dock. And that was pretty common for our industry. Even Crestron had some touch panels that had some pretty bad battery issues for a while. I mean, looking at what we were using then, and then looking at what's available now, I mean, it's night and day, and it's only been a couple of years, right? I mean, the iPad, 2011, 2010 came out.
Yep.
It's only been 5 or 6 years of having iPads available, or in devices like it. Like, I mean, tablets went crazy after the iPad came out, to the point where I think a lot of the control systems, Control 4 specifically, has moved to Android-based touchscreens for their in-wall devices, and it's basically an Android tablet that has Control 4 branding on it. So
yeah, and I'm sure that that's kind of what I was alluding to, in that I'm sure that the complication and cost of producing one of these devices has come down quite a bit, because there's just a lot of different OEM type of products and operating systems and things like that you can look at as a manufacturer. And so I certainly above my pay grade, and who knows, but it is interesting nonetheless to see what Savant is doing in terms of user interface. And there's a lot of really, really cool stuff to come on that front out of Savant. And like I said, I look forward to being able to share more about it as we move forward. Last one that they alluded to in this press release and spent some time talking, I don't think will come as a surprise to you or to anybody who listens to our show, and that is, of course, voice control. And that is something that they don't currently have, and we just haven't heard much about as dealers, and we've all been clamoring for it, as you can imagine. And they did talk about that, and I think it probably goes without saying what platform is coming first. I'm just going to leave that out, right? I think that goes without saying, but they're clearly looking at it. No surprise there, and so it was good to hear that, but not shocking by any stretch. Doesn't
the little remote, I thought that was one of its key features, was it had voice control.
It does, but
not the same.
It's about the usability, meaning you've still got to go grab the remote, and that's great if you're sitting and watching TV, and there are use cases where that's going to continue to be the preferred method, and they're going to presumably continue to develop that as well. But the voice control platforms like Echo and Google Home, that's a different form factor and very much a different use case.
Right.
So that's really what they're looking at, and no surprise there.
Very cool. Well, that's exciting. To see another. Well, man, Amazon is just taking over the world. Let's just leave it at that, I guess.
Yeah. And we can wrap up on the summit here. I think one thing I did want to convey, and it's how they ended the summit, is Bob Madonna, the new CEO, new old CEO, whatever you want to call him, came back up and really reassure the dealer base, and just want to put it out there for, he issued a call to action to the dealers to help really get the word out there, because there's just been some of their competitors, there's been a lot of like rumor mill circulation when they flattened out their sales force and all of these sort of things, and that naturally leads to rumors, and they just want to get the word out there that they are 100% committed. And it was really refreshing to see the dealer base felt very energized. There was a fun event last night downtown that I went to for a couple of hours, and pretty much across the board, everybody I talked to was excited about what they saw.
Very good. Well, that's exciting. I can't wait to see what they come out with over the next couple of months, or I guess as we head towards. I guess the next big show is ISE. I'm not sure if Savant participates in that, but maybe we'll hear something by then.
Yeah. I believe they'll be out there. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I assume that they will be.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to see what they come out with. Let's move on here and talk a little bit about Sonos. Last week, we talked about their CEO, their original CEO, John McFarlane, stepping down and letting Patrick Spence in. A bunch of speculation within the industry and, in and outside of the industry of what that meant. Very interesting article here on Variety saying Sonos CEO, the new CEO, says maybe they're going to go public.
Yeah, I saw that. And, I don't think it would come as a huge shock to anybody if that was the direction that Sonos was looking to go. They were really a pioneer in their space, and that space has changed drastically since they blazed a trail there, and they're now faced with a lot more competition from direct competitors as well as slight variations. Proliferation of Bluetooth speakers kind of fits into that equation, but mostly products like Amazon Echo have really come in and changed the landscape, and so there are numerous facets to this story of the new CEO coming on board, and I wouldn't be surprised if internally they were looking at what is the next step from that very high level of either getting positioned to be acquired potentially or to go public. Now that's all speculation, obviously, but they're a very large company, and they're kind of feel like they're at this crossroads, right, where they've got to decide, what they want to do. And saw one memo that he had released out to the employees of the company and talked about wanting to play in the big leagues. So I thought that was interesting to hear from such a large company to talk about wanting to step up and play in the big leagues. But it does remind you that companies like Apple and Google really do dwarf Sonos in size. And so where do they go from here?
Right. And I mean, geez, we can slam Sonos. It's pretty easy to make fun of Sonos and slam them pretty hard for not coming out with any product for the last, 10 years or something. It's been forever since we've seen a new Sonos speaker or system come out. The API that they released was a joke, and kind of we'll link to a couple of articles in the show notes at HomeTech.fm/145 about all the angst that's causing within the custom installation industry. I think you and I have talked about that enough. I'm not going to go there. But that said, I'm really encouraged by this Patrick Spence, what I've seen from him, at least over the last, couple of days and weeks. He seems to be pretty open to integration and, whatever works to move the product forward, which is, I think, has been Sonos's biggest problem is really, really holding on to that closed ecosystem and not attempting to bridge any gaps within integration. I think that's hurt them here in the long run, and you can see it. There are more people on the forums now trying, saying they're going to move away from Sonos from some of the things that have happened. So hopefully they'll get their act together. I'm kind of encouraged by this change of leadership.
I'm with you.
I'm hoping that I'm hoping we'll see good things come from Mr. Spence here.
Yeah. I think we can move on from that story pretty quick, but I got to say, I'm with you. I'm encouraged. There's been a lot of talk about Sonos since this change for obvious reasons, but some of those stories that have popped up have really been, I would say, revisits to an extent of some of that frustration that people have had with Sonos in the past. And, I think that he has him reach out to or respond, I should say, to Julie Jacobson on Twitter about a piece that she put out about how Sonos didn't communicate well with the integration channel. And he, replied directly to her and admitted to it and said they'll work on it. And I thought that was pretty cool to see. And then another article that, Sonos is going to be very committed to working with as many different platforms as they can. Mainly, they were focused in that article on voice control, so things like Echo and Google Home. But I think that'll carry over into other integrations, and presumably, we'll get that API beefed up a little bit and be able to take what is already a great product and make it a little bit better by tying it in and making it part of a more cohesive, connected home. So optimistic for the company. I'm with you. I think it's easy. They're one of those companies that when you rise to the top, there's a lot of people who are, you're going to, it just comes with the territory. You're going to take some criticism. And I think that overall they've been a pioneer, and I wish them continued success. I think it's a great product. So be fun to watch what happens there. But let's move on here. Speaking of voice control, there was an interesting article that I wanted to share. I put this out on our Twitter account at HomeTech Podcast. If you're listening and don't follow us on Twitter, head on over there and give us a follow. We'd appreciate it. But this was a story from Wired, and Seth, this one just rang true with me. It's a topic that we've talked about, and it's one of the themes that I hear you hit on very consistently when we talk specifically about Amazon Echo, and that is that The title of the article is Alexa is Conquering the World. Now Amazon's Real Challenges Begin. And the gist of the article is about, well, there's a ton of momentum behind voice control, and Echo's obviously leading the way there right now, but not just from a product competition standpoint, meaning not just from entrants like Google into the market, but more from a fundamental standpoint of this technology. We're still very early, and there are clearly some hurdles that are going to have to be overcome before it can really become a mainstream technology and widely adopted. So they talk about different voice user interfaces in the home. So for instance, you've got your Comcast remote and your Amazon Echo, and maybe even you have a Google Home as well, and those all have different nuances and ways that you speak to them. And now as an end user, that just doesn't create a consistent or great experience, because you've got to learn the different methods for using each one. And then there are some other technical challenges that are lined out in this article that are a little bit more in the weeds, but I thought it was a great read and a good reminder of where we're at in the midst of all this hype around voice control. It was a good reminder of where we're really at when you zoom out and look at the big picture.
Yeah. I mean, you have all these different systems, different ways to communicate with them, different wake words. I mean, people are. Amazon has made a product that has been fairly approachable and easy to kind of get on board with, and I think that's been good for them and good for the success of the product line of Echo. I'm just thinking back to that original video where they released Amazon, and it was kind of like this weird family asking very strange questions to a tube, and the tube was responding, and we were like, what the heck is this?
Yep.
It was a very, very strange video. But it's come a long way since then, and it's gotten a little bit better in some respects and kind of stayed the same in others. But we're fast approaching a point where, I mean, there is no standard here. Everybody is making their own. Some of these devices live in their own ecosystems. I'm looking at you, Apple and Siri. You pretty much need to have a phone for those to work, a phone or an iPad for those to work. It's just this. I don't think that's going to work for most people. I mean, you may not have a phone nearby to interact with your home or your voice command system, or however we want to talk about this moving in the future, and how these physical devices integrate with the voice control system are just going to be. I mean, it's going to be a lot tougher of an integration job than I think anyone is giving it credit for. It's cute that you can go up and say, "Hey," we'll say computer, because that's the new wake word. Hey, computer, turn on the lights in the living room and have them turn on. But I mean, it's a very clunky way of doing that. I mean, it would be better if you walked into the living room and said, turn on the lights, and that's what happened.
Right.
That would be better. And that should be the goal, but everybody kind of staking off proprietary devices, proprietary wake words. I don't see that future for a long time.
I think some of that is unavoidable at the early phase, but yeah, that'll be the big question, is how this all shakes out and eventually consolidates. And an interesting angle or facet to the story that you alluded to briefly there is how, we're not just talking about the Echo device. Amazon's platform can be built into other devices, as can Google Home, which we're at, to a certain extent. Like, we're going to touch on that here in a second. But so now what happens if you've got 5 devices in your kitchen that all respond to the same wake word? And that gets into one of the more in the weeds technical challenges that this article talks about, and how do product developers and software companies figure out and make sure that the right device is responding to the right commands, and that all the other ones are going to just, shut up and sit there, for lack of a better way to put it. And so that's just, that's the fascinating part about voice control to me is it's very cool, and it's a category that's just completely on fire right now, and everybody's excited about it. But we've just got a long ways to go, and I really look forward to gosh, it'll give us a lot to talk about for the foreseeable future here. So that'll be a lot of fun. A lot of fun to follow that trajectory. But speaking of voice control, we wanted to touch just quickly on a few stories. I don't want to dive too deep into these, but a few that I bookmarked this week. Google Home looks like they're busy, getting more integrations, I guess, and that's been the big edge for Echo so far that we've always talked about, is the head start they have in terms of just the amount of products that they integrate with. They're way out in front of Google Home on that. But this week we did see Belkin Wemo was announced, so I'm sure our listeners are familiar with that product lineup, but you basically got Wi-Fi, smart plugs, and light switches. And who knows, Seth? I'm wondering if the crock pot is part of this integration, but I guess we'll have to dig into that and find out a little bit. The connected crock pot. Vizio TVs are now capable. So this is kind of a cool one, and it really was something that Google Home users could do before. If they had the little Chromecast dongle hooked into a TV, you could use the Google Home to cast media up onto the screen. So, music or video, but with these Vizio SmartCast TVs, that's a version of Google Cast that's built right into the Vizio TVs. And so those now natively, the Vizio SmartCast TVs have the ability to integrate with Google Home, which I think presents some interesting possibilities.
Yeah, it kind of gives us pause when we talk about the 4K video over IP solutions that we were talking about before. If it's built right into the TV and you can activate it with your voice, I mean, where does the home control system sit anymore? It's going to be interesting moving forward to see how all the pieces get put together for what we're doing right now, which is essentially throwing a lot of money to make something magically happen. Eventually, it won't cost that much money, and all this stuff will magically work, and hopefully the idea is that it actually does work and work as expected when you yell at your TV, play Stranger Things on Netflix.
That's the big question, right?
Yeah,
definitely. Well, the other one I saw is LG Musicflow, and I don't know a lot about this system, but my understanding is kind of a Sonos competitor, and that is natively integrated with Google Home now as well.
Yeah, Sonos competitors come out the woodwork when the company's down, I guess, right? This looks pretty cool. I like this. I mean, this is decent speakers. I mean, they're not the little. Right now, you can play your music through the Google Home, which is like the little air freshener thing, and it's not going to sound all that great. It's got one little tiny speaker in it, and they do the best they can with what they have. But what we're all waiting for with Sonos and here with Google is the ability to pipe that music out into other areas of the home through premium or better sounding speakers. And we're supposed to get that with Sonos sometime this year with their Amazon integration, but it looks like LG has kind of beaten them to the punch with a Google Assistant integration and the ability to cast over the audio from the Google Home over to the LG speakers. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think that's going to be one area where Google Home is really going to quickly get traction and start to pull out in front of the Echo. As my prediction is that ability to cast audio and video around the house and to use it. You buy a couple of these LG Musicflow speakers and a Google Home, and you've got a fully voice controllable wireless distributed audio platform for not very much money. I haven't run the numbers on that, but that's pretty powerful. And from a use case perspective, consumers are really going to be driven to have something like that, if not those exact brands, at least that exact user experience. And that's where this is all headed. And I think Google's ability to what they call cast audio like that, and then having Google Home built into third-party devices and speakers is going to be pretty powerful. Right.
Yep. Like I said, it really makes the interaction that we're having right now, and the really brings to kind of question, what's going to happen to the bigger control systems in the future. Where will that market end up? And like you said, Savant's really focusing on that high end home. I definitely think that's going to exist in the future for them. So I think we're going to see a race to the top with our home integration systems.
Yeah, it's a very valid question, and I think it's one that every integrator and even consumers and certainly manufacturers should all be thinking about how this technology all develops and where does it all converge and come together. And that's one of the core themes of our show. One of the things we spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about here. And I really do think it's just a fascinating landscape right now to sit down and talk about every week.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Jason, I'm going to cue the sad music up.
And end the show on some melancholy news here.
I know that you probably sat down and wrote a version, if you will, of what was it, Don McLean's American Pie song when you heard the news? Where were you when you heard the news that 3D TV has died? Where were you, Jason?
Oh, so tragic. Such an unexpected and early death. Technology that just held so much promise. Just let that sink in for a minute.
3D TV is it's being called officially dead now that Sony and LG stopped making 3D compatible television sets.
No surprise.
No.
No surprise. This was I don't know. I have to admit I sat on the fence about this technology a little bit just at first. I didn't ever envision it being like a primary use case, but I thought, well, if you got maybe a 65-inch or larger TV in a media room, maybe it'll catch on a little bit. I had a couple clients that we did it for, and sat and watched it at their house when we were kind of getting things set up, and I don't know. It wasn't ever the same as it was when you went to a movie theater. And I don't even know how that technology is doing in the theaters. It's been so long. I just don't get out to movies anymore. And I'm assuming that they're still doing them. But I actually don't.
They do.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you from somebody who will go see a movie. Evidently, we're pretty solid in going to our movies. We're still going to the movies even after having our first. We're just going at separate times.
Yeah.
But
there you go.
I can tell you from being a hardcore moviegoer to just loving going to the theater, we actively avoid 3D movies. I mean, they cost more. They make both my wife and I sick. I mean, I physically get sick. I may as well have a pint or two before I go to the theater if I come out.
Interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me. So we actively avoid them for a number of reasons, but mostly we just enjoy a regular screen without having to wear goofy glasses. And I definitely realize that a lot of the special effects these days are really cool in 3D. Like I'm thinking of the new Star Wars movies that are out, but man, sure. We don't like them, so we avoid them and we don't go.
Yeah, I have heard that before. People get headaches and dizzy and feel a little bit nauseous. I remember seeing Avatar in 3D. I think that was the last movie I saw in 3D IMAX, and that was pretty interesting. It was a cool experience, but I do remember portions of the movie, particularly towards the end, where I kind of started to feel a little bit of a headache, and so I think that is probably a fairly common thing. But in any event, I think 3D technology in the home, it wasn't the right format, and the glasses were clunky and uncomfortable, and I'm sure if you have young children, I'm sure they were constantly getting lost, and it just wasn't the exciting technology that the market latched onto the way TV makers hoped, and I think 4K eventually came along and was that technology and that marketing hook that people have really gotten into. And so these companies are looking at their development dollars and the cost of their products and figuring out where to put that money. And I think technologies like 4K and HDR and built-in streaming apps, these are the future. And so not surprised to see 3D TV go by the wayside here.
Yeah, I will echo that and say not surprised at either.
Maybe curved TVs will be next.
Let's Well, one can only hope. I will have a not a funeral dirge like we just heard, but some decent celebratory music when that day comes.
Fair enough. Well, we'll look forward to it. But that's it for our show this week. Once again, just want to thank everybody for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And if you enjoy the show, find it entertaining, informative, or both, hopefully, we'd encourage you to go over once again to HomeTech.fm/support, HomeTech.fm/support. And that is where you can learn more about becoming a patron to our show and supporting our efforts here on the Home Tech Podcast. So had a great time recording this one with you, Seth, and we'll look forward to reconnecting again next week.
Sounds good, Jason. I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take care.